Welcome to the Betting Above the Rim podcast, episode 118. Today's date, January 29th. Let's get into our tip-off topics, and we're going to kind of split it right down the middle between the NBA and the WNBA. Leading off with the NBA, ton of injuries that we want to get to right away. And the first off is the big one, is Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis is going to be out at least a week due to an abdominal muscle strain. This is any kind of core muscle strain is always a tricky thing. Anthony Davis, someone that we've talked about on this network, and I've talked about specifically being available, right? So when you look at Anthony Davis this year, Anthony Davis had himself a phenomenal year, 25.7 points per game, nearly 12 rebounds per game, played in 42 contests for the Lakers. So when you look at AD playing in 42 of 45 games, this is where you start to get concerned, because this is an AD that's dealt with injuries throughout the course of his career. But if you look closely, folks, he's been better the last 2 years. Played last year 76 out of 82 games, obviously 42 this year out of 45. But then you start looking back, 56 and 22, 23, 40 and 21, 22, 36 in 2021, 62 and 19, 20. For a Lakers team right now, folks, in a loaded Western Conference is really jockeying for positioning and seeding. Lakers coming off a loss last night to Philadelphia. The second leg of a back-to-back, sitting at 26 and 19, fifth place in the Western Conference. But folks, only 3 games out of the loss column from being out of the play-in. AD's got to get back and get back soon for the Lakers. Moving on to another injury with a team fighting for a playoff spot, Jalen Johnson is going to miss the remainder of the regular season due to a shoulder injury. Jalen Johnson, let's be honest, folks, was in the discussion for most improved player in the NBA. Jalen Johnson this year that was getting you a double-double, 19 points and 10 rebounds a game from the class of 21 product out of Duke. And it kind of sets up an interesting scenario here. You got to look at this, folks. Jalen Johnson's scoring has gone up every year since he's been in the league. 2.4, 5.6, 16, 19 points per game, right? Rebounding, 1.2, 4, 8.7, 10. Shooting 50% from the floor. Now, shooting percentage from three is at 31.2%. But also a guy that's got a 5 assists, 2 assist to turnover ratio, 2.5 times, which is outstanding for any player in the NBA. So we have to look at the fact of Jalen Johnson being out for Atlanta. This Atlanta team sitting in 9th place in the playoff race. I told people, and remember, I've said this numerous times. I think I said it maybe on the last episode, if I'm not mistaken, that I did not think that Atlanta was going to make the playoffs. And I think that is going to be something that you're going to want to look out for this Atlanta team is can they make a run to the playoffs right now? And I think that's something that they're going to be fighting for their lives. I don't think they're going to make it. That's my personal opinion on it. Obviously, I like what I've seen out of trade, some of those guys, but I do think that this team is in a world of trouble. Let's move on to, before we get into the WNBA, the De'Aaron Fox situation. De'Aaron Fox, as we know, according to Shams, has now said that he wants to be traded. It kind of went around the same time as, the Jimmy Butler thing started to heat up again with Miami. So it sets up an interesting play right now with De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox's preferred destination is San Antonio. De'Aaron Fox is a Southern kid. I think he was born in New Orleans. But if you look at San Antonio, is that really a good spot for him? They have Stephon Castle. So unless you're trying to play Fox and Castle in the backcourt, now if I'm Sacramento, that's the first guy I'm asking is for Stephon Castle. So I wonder if that makes sense. What does make sense is Miami. Now, you got to figure out if this is going to be some kind of trade involving Jimmy Butler, or Jimmy Butler trade is something completely separate. De'Aaron Fox, Tyler Hero backcourt is so intriguing for me. I think it was something that could work. And I think De'Aaron could benefit from that Heat culture. So that's something to look out for, is this De'Aaron Fox situation what happens? Remember, he is going to be a free agent after next season, 25-26. So if you're Sacramento, you should want to move him now because you're going to get a bigger return. It won't be a rental. The problem is De'Aaron may not want to sign an extension at those certain places. So something to look out for is De'Aaron Fox. I think there's a good possibility he can get moved from Sacramento. And think about this. When they traded for Domantas Sabonis, they either could have traded Tyrese Halliburton or De'Aaron Fox. Remember, they had Davion Mitchell as well. Well, they trade Halliburton to get Sabonis. Davion Mitchell doesn't go work out. Now he's in Toronto, and now they may lose De'Aaron Fox. Tough times for a Sacramento team basketball. Let's move on to the W as a flurry of action is taking place. Remember, folks, in the WNBA, you could sign contracts starting February 1st. The big one, folks, is Brittany Griner. Played her entire career, 11 seasons with the Phoenix Mercury. Brittany Griner is signing with the Atlanta Dream. And this is something that nobody had on their radar. And probably one of the more shocking signings in the free agency in the WNBA, which looks like you're going to see a lot of movement. Now, she goes to a team in Atlanta that finished up last season with the 8th best record at 15-25. She will make them better, take some pressure off of Ryan Howard. Alyssa Gray. So you have some pieces here for an Atlanta Dream team that's going to look to move up in the Western Conference. Let's see how Phoenix responds to losing out on that. Moving on, big trade that involved Phoenix. Here's maybe how they recovered from this. Alyssa Thomas, all-world player, walking triple-double, heading to the Mercury, and a package that included some picks and some players. Now, Alyssa Thomas is one of the 5 to 10 best players in the league, and she's going to fit in nicely there as that kind of jack of all trades kind of player that's going to help out someone like a Kalia Copper. Remember, she's going from a team where they gave up the least amount of points in the WNBA at 73.6 to a team that was 10th that gave up 84.8. Alyssa Thomas is one of the better defenders in the league. Let's see how this matches up. Also, let's see what happens with Diana Taurasi if she decides to come back to the Phoenix Mercury for another season. Speaking of run it back, Kelsey Mitchell's running it back with the Indiana Fever. She was signed to a maximum contract to return to an up-and-coming franchise in the Indiana Fever. If you now look at the fact that they've gotten back, they're going to have Caitlin Clark year 2. They're going to have Aaliyah Boston. They're going to have Kelsey Mitchell. Let's see what happens with Alyssa Smith. There's a lot of talk, obviously, about them trying to get a player like Satu Sabally. I still think it's going to be the Liberty, but this young team, that now has a new coach in Steph and Stephanie White coming back to coach Indiana should be a major player in the WNBA, folks. I'm going to say it. I really think that this Indiana Fever team is a top 4 team in the WNBA. We talk about New York, Minnesota, Vegas, and then Indiana, probably with Seattle sitting at 5th place right now. But crazy times in the WNBA with free agency, but good for the Indiana Fever to bring her back. Coming up next, we'll get into our awards. So we'll look at some championship odds in the NBA, and we'll look at the Rookie of the Year race, which is wide open with all the injuries, and we'll look at the future markets for a team like Orlando Magic now that Banchero and Wagner are back, and we'll look at all things NBA. We'll be back with our awards. Great. Welcome back to the Betting Above the Rim podcast, episode 118. It's time to get into our award tour where we look at future odds in the NBA and college. And let's start in the NBA with the championship odds. The Boston Celtics were about a 3-1 favorite preseason to win the NBA title. Right now sitting at plus 210 as the favorites, followed by Oklahoma City at plus 230. Then we have about a $6 drop-off to the Cleveland Cavs at 8.5-1. Then another big drop-off with the Knicks at 13-1, Denver to 14-1, and then another big drop-off, Dallas 21-1, Memphis 25-1, Milwaukee 26-1, Houston maybe the surprise team along with Cleveland in the NBA at 39-1, and the Clippers at 40-1. So listen, why do we think Boston is the favorite? It's simply put, folks. Number one, Boston's got the fourth easiest schedule the rest of the way according to Tankathon, and a team that has championship pedigree. They've been there. They've gotten over the hump, so they should be absolutely favored to go ahead and win the title. Oklahoma City, obviously the best team in the Western Conference by 6 games. You could argue that the reason why they're not the favorite is because the West is probably more loaded, so getting across to the NBA Finals would kind of put them at a tougher spot than I would say Boston would be. But to me, when you start looking at teams that can win it, you got to start looking a little bit down the board. And yes, folks, it is the Knicks at 13-1. You know, the New York Knicks, you'll see how it comes down to stretch because the New York Knicks have the 5th toughest schedule the rest of the way, including 3 games versus Cleveland and 3 games versus Boston. So that's going to do a lot to decide where we stand on New York as we get closer to the playoffs. But you can't mistake the fact that the New York Knicks team won 4 games in a row. They're in the middle of a really big home court stand, which they've already gotten big wins over Sacramento. And, of course, they got another win over Memphis last game. So we'll see the rest of that road trip. The home stand includes the Lakers as well. So New York is probably my pick right there at 13-1. Now, if you want a flyer of a team that could come out of nowhere, folks, you're thinking I'm crazy. Houston's playing really well. It's won 8 out of the last 10 games, 4 games in a row. And they've won, let's be honest, folks, some games impressively with some of the wins that they've had as of late. So you have to look at a team like Cleveland and say, Houston and say, yes, they're absolutely a threat with that defense, with the way Ime Udoka's got that team playing. Got to remember, folks, in that 4-game winning streak, folks, they've beaten Cleveland, and the 3 last ones, at Cleveland, at Boston, at Atlanta. 39-1, folks. Especially if you can get a cash-out opportunity. Houston at 39-1 to win the NBA title. Let's move on to the Rookie of the Year race, which is, it's wide open, right? Claire Ware, the rookie out of Miami, leads at plus 135. Stephon Castle, 4-1. Jalen Wells, plus 490. Alex Sarr, 5-1. Zach Edey, 16-1. And then a huge drop-off to Zachary Bichette, Isaiah Collier, so on and so forth. So when you look at this, why Ware? Well, Ware has been someone, folks, that's benefited from the Jimmy Butler saga or circus or whatever you want to call it at this point. Ware's only giving you 8.6, 4.8. But, folks, he's scored 20 or more points in 3 of the last 5 games. He's got double-digit rebounds in 3 of the last 4. He's averaging 13.5 points and 7.1 rebounds per game. And think about this, folks. Every game that he has gotten 30-plus minutes in the month of January, folks, he's gone double figures in points and just about double figures in rebounds if he gets 30 minutes. If Ware gets these minutes and they move Bam to the 4, Ware plus 135 looks like, gee, he could be a legitimate contender to win. Don't sleep on Stephon Castle as well. Zach Edey's at 16-1 because he's already missed 14, 15 games. He's too close to that 18-game deadline. So Ware should be the favorite along with Stephon Castle. I actually are going to put a ticket on Ware. When you look at for over on the win total, let's go to Orlando. Jamal Mosley, I've talked about numerous times, I think is the coach of the year. And Jamal Mosley's got his guys back. So now we're looking at Orlando's win total at 45.5 over at even money, under at minus 122. So when you come and think about it, folks, Orlando has 34 games left to go. Folks, they have the third easiest schedule left in the NBA. They only got to play, the top teams have to play Cleveland twice, Rockets twice, once against Boston, Memphis, Denver, Milwaukee. Folks, they got 3 games against Washington left. They have 2 games against Toronto. A Toronto team that's playing much better. So when you look at 45.5 games in regards to Orlando, we're thinking over. We're thinking if they can stay healthy, and obviously the play of Wagner and Banchero should be able to do that. Look for Orlando to go over 45.5 wins. Quickly, 2025 Final Four. Quick thoughts as of today, because it could change next week. Auburn minus 120 to make the Final Four. I'm a huge believer in Alabama, who may have the toughest schedule right now I've ever seen in college basketball, at plus 260. I like Houston. I like what they've seen defensively. I thought that win at Kansas was huge at plus 175. And speaking of Kansas, folks, plus 650. I know they've underachieved, but I'm banking on Bill Self, one of the best coaches in the country, and getting Bill Self and that team to play basketball the way they need to play, with DeJuan Harris and Hunter Dickinson, AJ Storr, Zach Mayo. They have guys, just haven't put it together yet. But I still can't go south on Bill Self. Plus 650 for Kansas to make the Final Four. Coming up next, we will go to our scouting report. We preview a big game in the NBA between the Rockets and the Grizzlies. We'll also look at the Suns at the Warriors. We'll take a look at preview a big game in the SEC with Florida going to Knoxville to take on Tennessee, and Auburn at Ole Miss with a little buzzer beater at the end. We'll be back with our scouting report after this commercial break. Welcome back to the Betting Above the Rim podcast, episode 118. And let's get into our scouting report as we preview the best games in the NBA and college basketball. Leading off with a huge matchup on Thursday night as Jalen Griner and the Houston Rockets, off a 3-game road winning streak, head to Memphis to take on Ja Morant and the Memphis Grizzlies. And you look at the Grizzlies, who had been playing really good ball until getting absolutely torched by the Knicks, 143-106, now get the head home and take on Houston. Listen, folks, this is the last game the teams will play. Do know that the Houston Rockets have won all 3 games so far, 128-108, 119-115 at Memphis, and 120-118. That game was about 2.5 weeks ago. So to me, it's about who is available, right? Is Ja and the rest of these guys going to be available? Because you look at the last time they played a couple weeks ago, Ja was available, Jaren Jackson. So everybody played for the Grizzlies. I think the one thing you have to look at here is possibly, as this game is going to be important in regards to the standings of the NBA. Right now, Houston sits at the 2 seed with 14 losses. Memphis at the 16. Because it's hard to beat a team 4 times in a row, I'm going to think it's going to be a relatively close line. Give me the Memphis Grizzlies on the money line. Maybe you get a little bit of a slip-up of Houston after getting those 3 big wins on the road. Do remember that after this game against Memphis, they still have to go to Atlanta. So I'm sorry. They play at Memphis. I'm sorry, and then Houston then goes home to Brooklyn. So maybe a little bit of a slip-up here. Give me the Grizzlies on the money line. Next matchup, Friday night, Suns at Warriors. Really two teams that are, I don't want to call them hanging on for dear life, but really two teams that have been marred by inconsistent play. Sun coming at 24-21. That's good for the 8th seed. The Warriors 1 game out of the play-in at 23-23. And to me, looking at this matchup here, it's about the star players. It's about D-Book. It's about Kevin Durant. It's about Bradley Beal if he's still a member of the Suns versus Steph Curry and the rest of the Warriors. So to me, looking at this matchup and the fact that they've already played twice, Suns winning 1, Warriors winning 1, I'm going to go ahead and take the Suns. Probably going to be a relatively close spread, but they're going to probably be the underdog. Give me the Suns, who have won 3 games in a row. Meanwhile, Warriors lose to 3 out of the last 4. Give me the Suns on plus the points, maybe a little sprinkle in the money line that they win outright. Let's head to the college game where it's always big Saturdays in college basketball. And what bigger game on Saturday, maybe top 10 matchup, and that's Florida at Tennessee. Folks, this should be the revenge game. You got to remember, Tennessee went to Florida a couple of weeks ago, and they got their, if I'm not mistaken, they got their doors blown off by 30. Now, we have to look at what happened. You got to remember, folks, that the star guard Ziegler went down with a knee injury during the game versus Kentucky last night. So it's going to be important to see what happens here, in regards to Tennessee, if Ziegler is going to be in the lineup for the Tennessee Vols. They lost that game 78-73. So if Ziegler's playing, we're looking at Tennessee, but this game should look at the under. Flip side, Auburn, Ole Miss. Auburn's 18-1. They're undefeated in the league. You figure they're going to come through with it. Folks, give me Ole Miss. Ole Miss on the money line outright. Chris Beard finds a way to get it done. Speaking of getting it done, thank God the NCAA has come to his senses. Our buzzer beater is that they've moved up the start time of the national championship game 30 minutes to 8:50 p.m. Folks, I am 48 years old. I don't know if I've seen one shining moment live in the last 10. I can't stay up. I could drink all the coffee I want. The NCAA's got it right. I have 2 suggestions. Number 1, move it back 30 more minutes. Play it at 8:20, right? 5:20 West Coast time. But here's the big one. I want to see the women's championship game be played at 3 or 4 o'clock on a Sunday. Play the men at 7 o'clock at night. Let's load up and make it a big Sunday for college basketball. This has been your Betting About the Rim podcast, episode 118. For all things sports gambling, download the app. Pre-game, in-game, post-game, props, predictions, and more from the very best in the sports gambling industry. For my producer, Maddie George, Vinny, who does a great job with the graphics, thank you for listening, folks. And remember, it's smarter to be on Sports Grid. Good night.